So today, the big question that we're going to be answering is, are you ready for your DORA third-party risk management, which takes effect at the end of the month? And we'll go through the timeline after the call, right at the end of the call, as to what needs to be ready and have you checked all the boxes. And so I'm going to just jump into, I've made a cool little presentation for everyone to have a look at and follow through. Because we're dealing with regulations, we've got to be 100% no fun, straight into the Excel, because that's what it's all about, right? And you'll notice here, this is exactly what we're going to be going through. So if you came here to have a good time and you came here as an end of year kind of, let's put my feet up and relax because Brad's going to teach me everything I need to know, you're wrong. We're going to go through line by line of Excel, and we're going to make sure that you've hit every single item that needs to be done here. And that's pretty much what compliance and regulation is all about. So, or if you know me at all and you know the team, we're a little different. And so today we're gonna shake it up a little bit. Whilst we do have the Excel that you can download and get the entire checklist for your DORA compliance, we've made it a little bit more festive, because why not? A lot of people have already taken off. I know the GT team, we get off next Friday is our last day. So let's make this a little bit more festive, shall we? Here we go. So we're going to try and make this a step-by-step checklist process as bearable as possible for this time of year, knowing that we would all rather be cozy around a fire if you're in the northern hemisphere, or if you're in the southern hemisphere, around the pool, as I'm sure you're all melting. And we're going to go through what is expected of companies to prepare for their DORA compliance, which kicks in January. And so the first thing you need is a comprehensive register of information. So essentially, you need a list of all of your vendors. And so that can be easily managed in an Excel. In fact, the DORA regulation gives you an Excel that you need to add all of the details to, and they make it quite easy to follow. Essentially, you need a legal entity identification number, and the EU has these. So the entities must provide unique identifiers like legal identity identifier, LEI, and the European Unique Identifier, EUIED, for third-party providers. And these entities must record the country of origin using the ISO 3166-1 Alpha 2 codes. So yeah, it's a unique company identifier that you need to have. So each one of those, you want to put those in. You also need to show an organizational structure. So you need the financial institutions must document the group level and entity level hierarchies. And there's obviously in the template that is provided, you can show the different levels and ensure that all the intragroup and external dependencies on that organizational structure. And then finally, you need the contractual agreement tracking. And so each contractual relationship must be assigned a unique contractual agreement arrangement reference number, which is consistent across all templates. So every single time you have a contract with the external vendor, you need to have a specific reference number to that, and then refer to that customer's agreement with that reference number. What's tricky is it's not the same as the legal identity number. That is to reference the vendor, and then each one of the contracts. So say you have multiple contracts with the vendor, they each need to have their own reference number. And that needs to be a consistent type of reference number, which means that you have to use the same kind of methodology when creating a reference number between different contracts. And the financial entity must include information about overarching, standalone, or subsequent arrangements. So anything in those agreements need to be included across everything. So if this contract states that you'll provide X, Y, and Z, and it connects to another contract, that needs to be all in one contractual agreement. And another caveat, all the contractual agreements need to have an SLA, and I think there's about 4 or 5 specific clauses, which we'll jump into, but we have it on the Vendifi site, which I'll link in the notes, as to where you can see those contractual clauses, because you'll have to update all of those contracts in your business to identify those clauses. Great, let's keep it festive and jump into classification and ranking of ICT providers. So DORA emphasizes the classification of your ICT service providers to manage risk effectively. So the financial institutions are provided to assign a rank to each provider. The direct ICT provider is ranked as 1, and then subsequent subcontractors are ranked incrementally, so 2, 3, 4, and so on. So if you have a provider and they've got subcontractors or additional contractors to assist, you need to rank each one that you're dealing with. And you have to document the subcontracting chain. So the financial institution must track subcontractors' critical ICT services supporting significant functions. So anything in the business which is significant, which makes a business critical, that needs to be identified what subcontractors are used. And then those subcontractors, we need to check on them to see a number of factors. So they are as important as your first initial contractor. And so this includes documenting complex subcontracting chains to identify potential vulnerabilities. So the whole point with DORA is it's to be resilient. It's in the name. And so the idea is when you bring in subcontractors, we need to, as a business, you need to understand the risk of that subcontractor. And the risk doesn't fall on the ICT service provider alone. It also falls on you as the business to double check that subcontractor. And so you need to assess the concentration of risk. So you need to be able to evaluate the potential for those risks. And this involves assessing whether reliance on a single provider or limited market options possesses operational risk. So if you have a provider and that's the only provider in your area, what happens if that service provider no longer can be in business? Say you wake up one morning and something happened and they can no longer provide you services. What do you do? And so you've got to then identify this risk and have mitigating circumstances in which you can then pivot in the case of an emergency. So quite robust in what you need to do. And you need to show the regulator that you've done this with each one of your service providers. Moving on to standardized data reporting templates. So to ensure interoperability, those are big words that I can't say so early in the morning here. So what you need to do, basically, the DORA regulation mandates the use of standardized templates. And these templates are designed to make sure that there's technology neutrality. So what does that mean? Templates consist of predefined columns and indefinite rows, ensuring scalability and adaptability. So this is one of the Excels that are provided, and essentially everyone is going to use the same document so that there's no ifs or buts when submitting a report. You can 100% have the same document and know how to fill it out. And it also makes sure that the flexibility ensures scalability, allowing institutions of varying sizes to comply without the need of extensive system overhauls. So this is the document you guys need to fill out. It's the same for everyone. Go ahead and do it, regardless if you have one vendor or 1,000. One document to fill out so that the technical neutrality is there. The data consistency across levels. Institutions must maintain accurate and uniform data at 3 organizational levels: entity, sub-consolidated, and consolidated. So this approach ensures the seamless integration of data across multiple reporting frameworks, reducing duplication and errors. So this is pretty straightforward. You want to make sure that everything that you cover is in one area and you label it either the entity, the sub-consolidated, or the consolidated, which makes a lot of sense. And then different rules will apply to different areas. But then also, because a number of companies use a lot of different frameworks, as long as these items are labeled in this sense, it should cover whichever framework your business is using. And then we've got the relational data structure, and each data entry is interconnected using unique identifiers. So we chatted about those with the company unique identifiers. And we've got the contractual reference numbers. So each one of the actual agreements is going to be a unique identifier. And then you have function identifiers to connect the RCT services with specific business functions. So this specific service is in sales, so we're going to mark it a sales function. And so you can see where in the business that specific vendor operates, so that it's quite easy to identify from the reference numbers where that specific vendor works in the business. And so these templates help support regulatory oversights, and so that it's easy for everyone to understand the same process. So the reporting is easier, so that everyone can say, when the regulatory body comes around and says, hey, can I check this out? It's the same process where everyone helps along the way. So you can get that download from obviously any of the regulatory bodies. We've also got it on our site, and yeah, you can go ahead and have a look at that Excel structure, and I can jump into it very briefly at the end. This is where things get a little spicy. Risk assessments for critical RCT services. So the core component of DORA is it emphasizes on assessing the risk associated with RCT services critical to the financial operations. So what you need to look out for is the identification of critical services. What service in the business is critical? If that service in your business no longer can operate, it will essentially bankrupt the business. The business will not be able to function. If you identify one of those areas in your business, what RCT service providers help you maintain that business process? And so that would then become a critical business process. So financial entities must identify these RCT services that support critical or important functions, and they must be categorized based on impact, sensitivity, and reliance level. So that's the identification of critical services. The sustainability analysis is where financial entities are required to assess whether the RCT services are substitutable, and if so, how easily they can be replaced. So looking at a internet provider, that is a very important requirement in a business. You probably need 2 at minimum so that you have a failover. How many can you assist in substituting? So have you checked it out? Have you managed to see if you can substitute any of those providers? What do the contracts say? That's the idea behind the substitutionality. And then you got the impact assessment. So institution must evaluate the potential impact of the service disruptions, categorizing them as low, medium, or high. So that's important. You want to be able to say, is this function in the business critical or non-critical? And then what is the impact that it has on the business? And so that's another important thing. I would rate that having a presentation at Christmas time, festive, has a high impact on people's lives. If I went for the plain old Excel format, would not such a big impact. People will probably switch off and put this in the background and not worry too much. And then finally, audit and review. Entities must conduct regular audits of RCT service providers, including internal reviews and pooled audit units and third-party evaluations. So you've got to constantly check to see if your third parties are up to scratch. And the results of these audits must be recorded, and specific attention to data storage, processing, and management practices. So not only have you got to check these vendors, you've also got to make sure that the data that you store is in an environment that you control, that it's not out there because you'll be affecting GDPR standards. And so you want to keep the data in your environment. You want to be able to check them continuously, and you want to be able to monitor that. So it's quite a big overhead of what is actually required. If we jump into our next area, the oversight of intragroup and external RCT arrangements. So this is to capture the complexities of the RCT dependencies within financial groups. So DORA is trying to create a stringent oversight here, and one of those is the intragroup dependencies. So financial entities must document intragroup contractual agreements and reconcile them with external ICT agreements. So within the company, who is using these vendors and what are they using it for? And are we sharing vendors? And we need to make sure that the contractual agreements line up with all of that. And that's heavily important. And you have to do subcontracting management. Institutions must identify and assess first-tier subcontractors outside of the group, even if the services do not directly support critical functions. So any subcontracting, you need to be able to say, hey, that's a subcontractor. They go through this agreement, this vendor, and you need to manage them as a first tier. And then you've got the consolidated reporting. And so the period undertakings are responsible for creating a consolidated register of information that includes all group entities and all their dependencies. So throughout this process, you're not only looking at throughout the entire business what you need to manage, you're taking a look at your providers and your providers, and then you need to manage it all in one consolidated reporting area. So it's quite a struggle to think if you're managing 5 or 6 vendors and they each have 2 or 3, that immediately throws the number up to 18 kind of areas that you have to manage, and you have to constantly monitor each and every single one, and you have to consolidate all that information in one location, and you then need to update a unified reporting template that needs to be provided to a regulatory body in the event of a request. So quite a lot there to manage, and for me, it is exactly why we started to look at Vendifi in these terms, because I don't think a manual approach is possible without a lot of manpower behind it. But let's jump into the principles of data quality and accuracy. DORA emphasizes the importance of high quality data to support effective oversight. So financial entities must adhere to 6 core principles when maintaining the register of information. Number 1, accuracy. Of course, the reported data must reflect current state of ICT relationships and services. Where is this vendor in the relationship? What have they provided you? Where are the contracts? Everything must be accurate and up to date. Number 2, completedness. No critical information should be omitted. So this means that if you say, this is a critical provider and they're going bankrupt, but we're not going to tell you because then we might be, in trouble, that is going to cause a bit of a problem. So you need to be 100% transparent with all information at all times and keeping that up to date in one area. You have to be consistent. The data must be uniform. So it can't be kept in, we keep some data in this database, we keep some in this file share, we've got some information over there in that SharePoint site, we've got some in Oracle database, and we've got some in SAP. It needs to be consistent, it needs to be accurate, and it needs to be 100% kept in an integrity format. So information must remain unaltered unless updates are necessary. So what information you're getting and the source you're getting it from, you shouldn't be changing that source. It should be showing you exactly that information, and it must show that it cannot be manipulated in any way, shape, or form. So the integrity of the data is clean. And again, the uniformity, standard formats and terminologies should be used. Don't make up your own names for specific things. Use the industry standards. And then the validity. Data must be current and relevant to the reporting period. So you can't use outdated information. When an audit comes in and you haven't checked an ICT provider in 3 years, you have to show that you haven't. You need to also show that you have attempted to update that information and show that the provider has not responded, and then show that you are offboarding that provider. So you need to show a valid timeline, as well as all of the information needs to be valid within the financial year of the audit. And so anyone that is managing their third-party providers is well aware of all of this, and obviously has gone through all of these items. And like I showcased in the beginning, there is an Excel checklist for every single item in this list, and you can go through every single item and just know that you have to do it for every single one of your vendors as well as their third parties. And so we're nearing the end of the what you need to do. So I'm hopefully going to calm your anxiety once we get closer to the end. Just know we're getting there. The ICT service supply chain transparency. So DORA introduced a robust requirements for documenting ICT service supply chain. Essentially, you have to do something called service chain mapping. So financial entities must map all third-party providers involved in the delivery of ICT services. So you need to show exactly what's happening from beginning to end in a business process, and show who the providers are, and show them where they are in the business, and show a link between everyone and the business. And then you have to do something called identification of critical subcontractors. Subcontractors essential to critical functions must be identified and assessed. We've done that already. We've gone and said this is a critical function, this is a critical vendor. But again, they're trying to make sure that you understand that the whole supply chain needs to have transparency from beginning to end. So in that chain, how many do you have critical? And if a subcontractor is critical, what are your risk mitigation methods there? And then we have ranking and accountability. So each provider in the chain must be ranked. And so the rank is 1. So just like you're providing a rank for each one of your vendors, you need to provide a rank for everyone in the chain. And in that chain, you need to show who's the most important to who's the least important, which is going to be quite difficult. But you need to showcase that. So you need to say, well, in this specific supply chain, if this specific provider doesn't exist, then that has a precondition for each other provider not to exist. So therefore, their rank is 1. So that's quite tricky, and it takes a lot of time to understand how to put that together. More reporting. We've got the mandatory reporting of critical ICT dependencies. So for services supporting critical or important function, the DORA mandates detailing the reporting. So you need to do the service characteristics. So each critical ICT must be described in terms of its type, its impact, its operational role. You've also got the data sensitivity and storage. The location and sensitivity of the data must be reported along with the security measures in place. So anywhere that you are adding this reporting and keeping it and storing it, you need to be able to show a number of different requirements. Like you have to show if it's encrypted, you have to show the security around it, you have to show the SOC and who the provider is. So it is quite specific and important to make sure that the data sensitivity and the storage of any of the data kept while managing this is 100% monitored on the company's behalf. And then you've got the governance framework. So institutions must disclose the governing laws of their ICT contractors and the jurisdictions of the data storage and processing facilities. So if your ICT provider is in a country that is outside of Europe, you need to show what the governing laws are there and the jurisdiction of the data storage. So what happens and who's allowed access to that data. And that's quite an important function you need to think of. If the data and the information you are sharing with the third-party provider is in a country at war, and everyone or a dictator is taking over and they can do what they want to their data, that's a massive risk. You need to be able to identify that across your entire supply chain and isolate that risk and mitigate it by either moving providers or moving the storage. And so what are the implications for everything? And so this is where we start heading into why we're doing all of this and why we're protecting our businesses. And so the idea is the financial institution face increasing obligation to maintain operational transparency and mitigate against the ICT risks, right? And so an enhanced compliance requirement is essentially allowing the businesses to maintain a detailed and standardized register of information. There's far too many issues that occur where providers are or supply chains are compromised because of the lack of detail in the register of information around their vendors. So companies essentially don't know who all of their vendors are, and if one of their vendors are breached, what effect will that have on them? And this is why there is an enhanced compliance requirement. The financial institutions have gone, guys, you actually need to take care of this. It's really important in understanding who your vendors are and what part of the business it affects. And this should mitigate big issues that have happened over the years. The next part is investment in technology and training. It is super important that the businesses now start to do advanced data management to ensure accuracy, consistency, and scalability, as well as training programs for staff to familiarize them with reporting templates and ICT risks. So the DORA regulation requires not only for staff to be trained on a number of security risks, but any ICT provider that provides a critical service, they need to be trained as well. And you have to make sure that they are trained, so they need to train with your team. The regulatory oversight and audits, DORA introduces more stringent supervisory mechanisms. Institutes must prepare for regular audits. So they're going to come knocking and they're going to ask to check not only you, but your ICT providers, but your subcontractors. And comprehensive documentation to facilitate regulatory reviews. And there's obviously potential penalties for non-compliance or incomplete reporting. So you want to make sure that you've got this covered 100%. There is a strengthened risk mitigation strategies. And the point of this is to develop and implement exit plans for critical ICT services. So what happens in the event that we no longer need this vendor? What is the exit plan? What are you going to do about it? And what are the steps taken when you start this process? So we need to think about what we're going to do there. And you need enhanced capabilities to manage disruptions through improved sustainability and reintegration plans, as well as regulatory review on data storage processing arrangements to ensure compliance with cross-border and local data laws. So GDPR, you are not allowed to store data in specific areas. The way the data is stored needs to be specific. It needs to be actionable. There are rights. EU citizens can always ask for their data to be removed from certain places, or no matter what third-party provider you have, they need to comply with local laws. So huge focus on that risk mitigation. So finally, what does the compliance timeline look like? So as of now, December 2024, the end of the year, regulation enters into force. So as of the 1st of January, this is in place, but it's actually technically the 17th of Jan. But the first half of 2025, financial entities must begin the transition to standardized templates and start updating their information registers. So whilst it goes into force in January 2017, 17th of Jan, there is a loop period to make sure that everything is done. So you need to show that you're actually moving over and everything is happening. At the end of 2025, entities are expected to complete their risk assessments, register updates, and have compliance systems fully operational. And so then that's essentially what everyone is rushing to make sure that by the 17th of January, everything is in place, because the contractual agreements need to take place already, because you can't just change contracts halfway through their period. So by the first half of 2025, they want to see that you've already updated those agreements, that you've got the register of information in place. And so this is essentially what the DORA Act is asking you to do and giving you that timeline. So you need to be fully compliant by the end of 2025. That means everything that we've just gone through, you need to be able to show. And so I want to jump into how we can do this for you at Vendifi. So we've got a cool, quick little demo. How's everyone doing? Does anyone need a quick cocoa break, or can we jump straight into our demo?
No, you can proceed with the demo.
Yeah, good from my side.
And so here is Vendifi. And so Vendifi wasn't created specifically to manage DORA. It was actually created quite a few years ago to be a vendor management system for companies to onboard new vendors and manage the life cycle of their vendors. And not only vendors, a lot of businesses are using Vendifi to manage their franchisees. So a franchise will add all of their franchisees and they can monitor the security posture of the franchisees. And so what we can see here, it's got a cool little dashboard. You can see that this is actually built on SharePoint, believe it or not. In the back end, this is 100% SharePoint, and it's built on your SharePoint environment. So all the data stays within your environment and never leaves. So that is a checkbox for one of the DORA items. Is one of the most important ones is the data sovereignty needs to be identified. You can showcase at any point in time all the data is 100% within your SharePoint environment. And then the backend is in your Azure environment. So the way that this is deployed ensures that all the data is always yours, all the functions are always in your environment. So you're 100% non-reliant on another third party managing things. Microsoft takes care of everything, and their security is fairly good and will pass any of the regulatory's requirements. So let's jump in. One of the most important things was to keep all information in one area. And so you can keep each one of your vendors in the specific location. So here we've got GT Consult as a SharePoint development house, and all of their information as to who the internal owner as well as the external owner. So within here, I'm the owner of the vendor, and Craig Tar is the owner of GT Consult here. He's got his details and a little bit of information about them. I can also jump in to see more information and add additional information around that vendor right there. But what's important here is we can see the business impact straight away for GT on the specific Vendifi business. And at the moment, you can see it's non-critical. We can jump into this area and we can see there's non-critical. A number of different business entities are critical. And so that straight away, we've also checked the box for critical and non-critical vendors. And then we can jump into how this works. And so what happens here is we've created something called a due diligence checklist, which we can jump into. And we've essentially created a number of questions that are specific for each vendor based on their criticality and their business impact. And so all of these then need to be answered. We send off a specific questionnaire to the vendor, and they'll answer it in Excel. So they'll, just like everyone else, it's an easily readable template. They read the question, they supply a response, and if they need to add evidence, they simply supply the evidence, and then they'll just email it back to us. And this is all managed within a mailbox of your choosing in your business, and the information is all kept in the correspondence here. So one place with all the different responses and kept in one area so that you can see everything. What's also cool is we've got all of the signed contracts and agreements here as well. So we can quickly open that up and we can see the signed agreements with the signatures and all of the clauses within that, all in one area, and all of the documents attached with the dates that they were created. We can also see where the customer is based on their Google Maps address. So the UK GT Consult is actually right over here in that building over there. And we can update and add any documents that we need to the area in one easy to manage location. Like I said, it's all managed within SharePoint. So all of the information is in one area. If we take a look over here in the overview section, remember the DORA requirements needed you to monitor the cybersecurity posture and the risk with any one of your vendors. This happens in Vendifi all the time. The first thing that we monitor is the email and DNS security. Why? Well, 90% of all attacks originate through email. So that is the one area you want to pay a lot of attention to. And so if you have a look over here, we check all the main aspects within email and DNS security, and we monitor that all in one location, and that can be set to different intervals and schedules, and essentially all of these can be easily updated by your vendors. You can send them to our site. We can help them with a number of how-tos, but it's all over the internet on how to enable and secure each one of these areas in your environment. And that's just a great start. What we do then is we also do a domain scan, and we look at potential vulnerabilities. So you can see here, we do all of the subdomains for your vendor, and it will identify if any of those vulnerabilities are available. And you can actually go in and have a look and see if that vulnerability is a problem. And you can let your vendor know, hey, I see that we've got certain issues. Can you please check to make sure this is not a problem? And mitigate those with your vendor if you need to. Once all of these are done, so the vendor responds to the due diligence questionnaire, and we have a look at their domain scan as well as their email and DNS scans, we get a residual score for that vendor. And what we can do is we get an inherent risk score, which means it's the first score based on everything that you've looked at. They get a 67 out of 100. Now, if you need to add mitigation to any one of those areas where they lost points, you can do it. So say, for instance, they need cyber insurance. You can say, cool, I'm going to add cyber insurance because they don't have 100% score in their domain area. Then that score might go up. And you can manage all of these manually in each area, but you'd essentially go into the due diligence area, and you can say, I want to change the mitigation from low, and we've got insurance, for instance, on that. And then you can just say feedback updated insurance info, and you can then save this again. And what it will do is we'll then update in a moment, the residual score will go up or down based on what type of mitigation you've put in place. So very cool way to manage everything in one location, as well as all of this information is obviously in SharePoint, so you can slice and dice the data in Power BI. We have some built-in reporting areas. So you can see all vendors in one location and what category of service they do, as well as what software and service they're involved in, and be able to export that to Excel. So like one of the DORA requirements, be able to show every single vendor and where they are in the business. You can also check to see all systems. So what type of system is in the business and what vendors are managed in that area and what kind of business impact they have. Every single step of the way, Vendifi covers every aspect of the DORA requirement. And if there are specific due diligence questions that you need to create, you can simply jump into the admin section, create a specific area, create a requirement around that, and then label the business impact, critical or non-critical, and then the business risk as medium, high, or low. And that will essentially give you a question, an option to create a question. This question will go out to the relevant vendors in the business, and they will be able to answer that question. And you can set a renewal or once-off question. So if it's just when you sign a vendor up, they have to ask the question, or if you need to do it every year, you can then ask for evidence. So please provide contract around that, or a document or a link, and that needs to be added. And then you can weight that risk for your overall due diligence. So 5 being this is a very important question, 2 or 1 where it's not as important. And then obviously you can mark it active or inactive based on when you need to do it. And that will just populate all the questions for each one of the vendors in this due diligence questionnaire that is automatically sent out in a mailbox, and your vendors are managed. And so from the Vendifi side, if you are in the world where you need to manage all of your ICT service providers, Vendifi covers absolutely every single item, and we have all the step-by-step Excel document that I showed you right in the beginning that you're more than welcome to go through. And if you need a personalized demo, you're more than welcome to reach out to us and we can take it from there. Otherwise, I am going to open up the floor to questions from anyone else. Sujata, go ahead.
So on the dashboard, one new section has been added, that offboarding with onboard. So is it customer specific or it's same for all?
That's a very good question. Thanks. And thanks for the reminder. So let me just jump into this. If you have a look in the admin section over here, excuse me, let's jump into the settings. If you look at here, we've got this cool little area called exit requirement plans. And so you can look at view exit requirements. And at the moment, we haven't set up any, but you can go new requirement and you can say invoices to be paid. And so you can say ensure finance pays all outstanding invoices. And you can then select which critical impact is that. So we can say critical and we can click save. What that's going to do is it's going to add this to an exit plan. So if we had to go over here to this firm and we had to click offboard, and I can go click offboarding, it's going to say, sure, you want to offboard? Absolutely. What it's going to do now is it's going to send me a task to make sure that a specific exit plan is completed and that I need to then complete the payment of all outstanding invoices, etc., etc. So it will apply to any vendor that you're offboarding. It will add those specific exit plan requirements. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, I got it. Thanks. It's a new one. Yeah.
Thanks for the question. Yeah. So essentially, that's also part of the Vendifi offering, which covers the DORA requirement, where you need to have a specific exit plan and strategy when offboarding vendors. And so we've automated the lot for you. Thank you so much for joining us on what is the last webinar of 2024, not only for Vendifi, but the world, because everyone is going on holiday. But this will live in infamy on YouTube, and we will link it on our site. Isaac, yes, you got a question?
Braid, how are you? Nice to see you. Which country are you now?
Today, I'm in the United States of America, in Indiana.
Okay, because when you said this is in the morning, so I was thinking you're in UK. Okay, so my question is, first of all, that DORA, is there a certification for it? Or because I'm looking at from the responsibility that you explained, is it going to be the responsibility within an organization? Is it going to be with finance, audit, or ICT? Because sometimes when it comes to contract management, it's not only one department that is involved, so how do you manage that within an organization, and who's going to be the stakeholders of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So DORA is a European Union Act. So any European country that has a financial and a financial institution in that country, there's actually a list 26 odd different entities, but mainly the financial aspect of companies need to comply with DORA. So the requirement is not specifically to a individual in the business or a role in the business. The entire business needs to comply. So when you have a unique situation, well, not so unique, an everyday situation where you have a contract and a specific person in the business has been dealing with that vendor for years and they've done the contracts, that will still be their role and their responsibility. What DORA is saying is you need to keep all of that information in one area accessible to everyone in the business. So everyone needs to be able to access it, and it needs to be kept in a unified method. So if, for instance, sales and marketing are dealing with vendors, and legal are dealing with vendors, that information needs to be kept all in one specific location. They might not have to have access to it themselves, but they need to all keep it in one location so that if the regulatory body comes around, it is in one unified location where you can show me all of the contracts and all of the management around those contracts in one location. That's what the requirement is. And so if you're looking for specific DORA certifications, I've noticed that there are some that are available, but they aren't specifically certified by the European regulatory bodies as yet, because the DORA regulation hasn't 100% been completed. We're actually working off draft regulation at the moment, where certain areas haven't been ironed out 100%. But there are a number of bodies out there that do provide some certification around implementing the DORA area, but it's not 100% rubber stamped, should I say, right now.
Okay. All right. Thanks, man.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Anything else? You're more than welcome to download the DORA Ultimate Checklist on our site. It's Excel, and we've tried to make it as easy to use as possible.
Okay.
It's got, we've categorized the one area to manage everything, and then we've got exactly every single item. The checklist is 100% the ICT part of third-party risk of DORA Act, which is one pillar. There are a number of other pillars, and so we're not claiming to help you over the entire DORA implementation. There's also the DORA has to manage your internal business as well. So it's not just your third parties. On the Vendifi stuff, we do the third party, and we do that exceptionally well. We don't do the entire compliance, which I don't think any business has a one system that does the entire lot, because it's quite a big quagmire of information that needs to be covered. But what we do is the third party, and we do it exceptionally well.
Okay, please, Brett, one more question. For instance, if you are aware of the Microsoft's compliance portal, so how does this system, how does it sync, or how does it differ from that form of compliance that you can have around from the Microsoft Compliance Center? And how do they work together, and how there's a difference between the two?
Well, the Microsoft Compliance Portal is essentially a document repository of all of the certifications and audits done on Microsoft's information and systems. What we're doing is we're requesting information from third parties so that they can provide us with their audits and their security and their due diligence. So the difference is essentially, from our perspective, is we facilitate businesses' requirements in the regulatory space. So businesses are required to ask specific questions to all of their vendors, and they're required to monitor those vendors' cybersecurity posture and for risk. The Microsoft compliance centers simply have a document repository of all of the audits that have been completed. They're no way interactive. I think they're two completely different things.
Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
No problem. Great. So I'd love to wrap this up. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. And yes, if there are any other areas that we would like us to cover in future, please let us know. Next year, we are going to be delving into how Vendifi can help you with ESG. And we are going to be delving into how we look and test the cybersecurity posture of your vendors, from breach notifications to in-depth background checks, and everything else and in between. So we're looking forward to 2025 and Vendifi managing your vendors. Thank you so much for everyone for joining. I hope you have a wonderful break. You all deserve it, and come back firing and on all cylinders and excited for 2025.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. And enjoy United States as well. Enjoy the cold
Thanks,
weather.
guys.
All
Thanks,
right.
Brad.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Brad. Bye
Pleasure.
bye.
Cheers.
Thank
Cheers,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.